Hello everyone, welcome to another algebra tutorial video learning about polynomials. We are going to be discussing monomials, binomials, and trinomials in this video. It's exciting stuff, right? So polynomials, we've talked about polynomials are simply one or more terms added together, and each of those terms are composed of numbers and variables multiplied. And all those variables have to have whole number exponents. So when we're talking about monomials and binomials and trinomials, we're getting really specific about the types of polynomials we're working with. Think of these as more specific versions of polynomials. So you probably already, if you know some of your word parts, monomials means a polynomial with one term. A binomial is a polynomial with two terms. And a trinomial is a polynomial with three terms. So I've got an example of a one-term, two-term, and three-term polynomials here. And we're just going to go through talking about things like leading coefficients, the degree of the polynomial, and understanding kind of just some terms and words that we use to describe polynomials. All right, let's start with our monomial here, the very first one. We use purple, I like that color. So 5 times a times b cubed, we can think of this as a polynomial. And specifically, it is a monomial. It's got one term because it's only one thing. There's nothing else added or subtracted from it. So even though it's a bunch of letters and variables and numbers, it's still one thing. It's one term. So it's a monomial. If I'm talking about the leading coefficient, remember the coefficient is just the number part at the beginning of a term. The leading coefficient is 5 in this case, because there's a 5 times a bunch of variables, a times b cubed. The degree is just the power, or the highest power, of the term. So the degree in this case, you may think it's 3 because we see a b to the third, but if you have multiple variables, in this case I have a and b, those are different variables, I have to realize that a is to the first power as well. So there's really 4 different powers or 4 different factors of variables going on. I have 1a, but I have 3 b's all multiplied. So the degree of this one-term monomial is going to be 4. So be careful of that when you're working with polynomials that have multiple variables in terms of finding the degree. All right, let's look at a second example here. Let's look at the second one. This is a binomial, 6x squared minus 9. I could rewrite it as plus negative 9 if I wanted to, but this is a binomial, 2 terms. The leading coefficient in this one is going to be 6. Because I'm looking for, out of my 2 terms, the leading coefficient is the coefficient of the term with the largest exponent. So I'm going to focus on this x squared. And the leading coefficient is going to be 6. It's the part in front of the multiplying the x squared. It's 2 terms. The degree of this polynomial is going to be 2. It's a second degree polynomial. There is no variable factors with the negative 9, so I don't even have to worry about that term. All right, one last polynomial to focus on here is my trinomial. We're going to be doing a lot with trinomials and binomials in this whole unit, but we've got 1, 2, 3 terms going on. They're all being subtracted, or I could think of it as adding with a negative number for my coefficients. So let's talk about the leading coefficient here. You may think, well, there is no leading coefficient, right? There is nothing. I'm going to find my largest term, or the largest degree term, so it's a b squared. This is only b to the first power, and the negative 10 has no coefficient, or has no variable. So the b squared is my largest term, but there is no number in front multiplying it. Well, it's correct, it's true, there's no number written there, but I have to think of it as a 1. It's a 1 times b squared, so my leading coefficient is actually 1 in this case. The degree of this polynomial, even though there's 3 terms, I'm still looking for the term with the largest exponent, In this case, it's b squared, so the degree is also 2 on this one. So there you go. There's 3 examples. We have an example of a monomial, a binomial, and a trinomial, and talking about leading coefficients, especially being careful of when the leading coefficient is 1 and how to identify that, and thinking about, well, what is the degree of the polynomial? We're going to mostly be working with 1 and 2 degree polynomials, but we'll need to be able to handle higher degree polynomials as well. And especially noticing if you have multiple variables, like in this case, a and b, the degree needs to account for all the variables in a term. Hopefully this is helpful for you as you're working with understanding polynomial terminology.